This is the story of a catastrophic public relations miscalculation. What was engineered to look like a triumphant return to the global humanitarian stage, in Geneva actually became the devastating visual symbol of a crumbling media empire. In less than 24 hours, the carefully constructed illusion of aristocratic grace shattered, revealing a chilling level of commercial desperation. What looked like a routine international summit was actually a masterclass in moral contradiction, a moment that exposed the profound emptiness at the heart of the Sussex machine. In this video, we're going to unpack exactly how a highly publicized tour unraveled into visual humiliation. We will explore the dark, psychological reality behind the weaponization of victimhood, why the mainstream media has suddenly stopped caring, and how a quiet, masterful chess move from the Prince and Princess of Wales across the continent inadvertently destroyed what little credibility the Sussexes had left. By the end of this analysis, you will understand that this is not just another bad week in the press. This is the timeline of an ideological collapse. To fully grasp the magnitude of this current desperation, we have to remember the golden era they walked away from. There was a time when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were shielded by the most sophisticated, impenetrable public relations machinery on Earth. They possessed a level of global soft power that billionaires cannot buy, and politicians can only envy. They had the historical weight of the British monarchy backing their every move, an automatic aura of prestige that demanded global respect. When they stepped back, the promise was that they would transcend the institution. They were going to become global thought leaders, independent philanthropists, unburdened by archaic royal protocols. They had the $100 million streaming deals, the literary contracts, and the unquestioning adoration of the cultural elite. They held all the cards, but the contrast between that majestic promise and their current reality is where the schadenfreude becomes impossible to ignore. Because while the Sussexes frantically scramble to manufacture relevance, the actual working royals are executing a masterclass in quiet, devastating power. Consider the exact moment this recent crisis began. The timeline is crucial. Just as the Sussexes were preparing their latest media blitz, the Princess of Wales made her return to the international stage following a brutal year of personal health battles. She traveled to northern Italy to advance her early years educational project. There were no extravagant demands, no aggressive PR rollouts, and no desperate pleas for attention. Instead, the world witnessed an effortless, untouchable display of soft power. She was surrounded by genuinely affectionate crowds. Leaning into a project backed by years of peer-reviewed research and quiet dedication, she looked completely at ease, devoid of the frantic energy that often accompanies celebrity tours. Simultaneously, Prince William announced an initiative that fundamentally altered the public conversation. He committed to selling a massive portion of the Duchy of Cornwall to fund the construction of thousands of socially and environmentally sustainable homes. He is funneling profits into a £500 million initiative to tackle the housing crisis over the next decade. It is a legacy-defining move. It is tangible, undeniable proof of an institution putting its money where its mouth is. This is the ultimate aristocratic retaliation, ignoring the noise and building houses. Against this backdrop of staggering, undeniable royal impact, the Sussexes had to counter. They needed a headline. They needed to remind the world of their self-appointed status as global moral arbiters. And so began the disastrous sequence of events that culminated in Geneva. The strategy was painfully transparent. They needed to attach their brand to a high-stakes, highly emotional social issue. The chosen battleground was the danger of social media for children. Meghan Markle flew to Switzerland to deliver a speech on the perils of the digital age, lecturing the public on the necessity of protecting the vulnerable youth from the toxicity of the internet. On the surface, it sounds noble, but the execution revealed a staggering lack of self-awareness and a deeply unsettling moral contradiction. The public immediately noticed the glaring hypocrisy. Here was a woman standing at a podium warning the world about the dangers of the internet, just hours after launching a commercial lifestyle brand on those very same platforms. Here was a mother demanding absolute digital privacy, who routinely dangles carefully cropped images of her own children to feed the digital news cycle when a distraction is required. The cognitive dissonance was deafening. But the true ethical collapse occurred not on the stage, but in the margins. It was in the photographs. To amplify the emotional weight of their campaign, the Sussexes embraced the families of children who had tragically taken their own lives due to cyberbullying. They hugged grieving parents in front of flashing cameras. This is where the story shifts from a mere celebrity misstep into something far more sinister. The visual utilization of profoundly vulnerable grieving people to elevate one's own public profile is a dangerous line to cross. Observers and psychological PR analysts watched in quiet horror as the ultimate betrayal of trust played out in real time. It did not look like authentic empathy, it looked like the clinical extraction of someone else's tragedy to manufacture a redemption arc. It was the weaponization of victimhood engineered for a photo opportunity, and the media response was perhaps the most humiliating detail of all. In the past, a Sussex appearance would guarantee front-page dominance and fierce editorial debate. This time the reaction was a chilling collective shrug. If you looked closely at the headlines surrounding the Geneva trip, a subtle but devastating pattern emerged. Across numerous outlets from fashion blogs to international tabloids, the exact same headline was copy-pasted, "Meghan Markle delivers powerful speech." It was duplicated word for word. This is not the mark of global impact. This is the mark of lazy, automated weekend journalism. It proved that editors are no longer assigning reporters to listen to what she actually says. They are simply taking the pre-packaged press releases handed to them by the Archwell communications team, slapping it on a web page to meet a quota and moving on. It is the ultimate insult to a public figure being treated as a low-effort content filler rather than a newsmaker. Meanwhile, their commercial foundation was showing massive structural cracks. To mask the disastrous optics of the Geneva trip, their camp strategically leaked news of upcoming Netflix projects, whispers of a polo documentary, an adaptation of a romantic novel, and a gritty war movie was suddenly pushed into the media bloodstream. But the audience has grown remarkably cynical. Years have passed since these grand production deals were announced, and the return on investment has been virtually non-existent. The constant announcements of things they are going to do, used purely as a smokescreen to cover the things they are failing at, have entirely lost their power. The contrast is brutal. While the king quietly visits victims of national tragedies without a single camera crew in tow, Harry and Meghan fly across the world to demand applause for their compassion. While William builds actual homes for the working class, Harry and Meghan build imaginary movie slates to appease angry studio executives. They are bouncing off the walls, desperately seeking a narrative that will stick. But the public has recognized the pattern. The audience is exhausted by the relentless demands for sympathy from two of the most privileged people on the planet. As the Geneva trip concluded, the silence following the event was deafening. There were empty seats in the auditorium. There was a profound lack of cultural resonance. They had played their most emotionally manipulative card, and the world simply looked the other way. But the true crisis was not what happened in Switzerland. The real terror was waiting for them back home, because while they were busy trying to control the global narrative, a quiet, catastrophic shift was happening within their own ranks. A cornerstone of their remaining credibility was about to fracture, forcing them into a corner from which there might be no escape. The fracture waiting for them behind closed doors was not a tabloid rumor. It was a structural collapse within the one institution Prince Harry had left that commanded universal respect, the Invictus Games. For years, Invictus was the untouchable crown jewel of Harry's portfolio. It was his authentic legacy, a noble endeavor that insulated him from the increasingly shallow reality of his Hollywood pursuits. But as they returned from the disaster in Geneva, the quiet bleeding behind the scenes of Invictus became impossible to hide. Key executives and senior leadership board members were stepping down. Crucial sponsors were allegedly reconsidering their long-term commitments. What looked like a standard corporate restructuring was actually a devastating metaphor for the contagion of the Sussex brand. The Invictus Games, once a pure celebration of military resilience, was slowly being suffocated by the heavily curated shadow of Meghan's lifestyle rollouts and the couple's endless demand for the spotlight. The veterans were being pushed to the background, serving as mere extras in the Sussex reality show. That detail matters, because when you lose the military community, you lose the last pillar of unquestioned moral authority. This internal crisis perfectly highlights the permanent rift in their public identity. The public interpretation is that they are a united front fighting a hostile press, but the private uncertainty, the subtle signals bleeding through their recent appearances, suggest a massive internal divide in how to salvage their empire. Prince Harry desperately clings to his geopolitical ambitions, writing op-eds and lecturing on international conflicts, only to be met with eye rolls from a public that remembers him sharing intimate, embarrassing biological details in his memoir. Meghan, on the other hand, is aggressively pivoting to commercial lifestyle ventures, launching an artificial intelligence app to track her outfits, while simultaneously decrying the dangers of technology to vulnerable mothers in Switzerland. This is not just bad PR. This is an identity crisis playing out on a global stage. The audience is witnessing two very different brands trapped in the same failing corporate vehicle. They are producing nothing yet, demanding everything. And hovering over all of this is the ticking clock of 2026. The original $100 million Netflix contract, the financial bedrock of their Californian exile, is reaching its natural expiration. The industry insiders know that the return on investment has simply not been there. The original documentary was a massive success because it promised to burn down the House of Windsor. But that trick only works once. Since then, the promised adaptations, the Polo shows, the animated series, have either vanished into development hell or materialized as entirely forgettable content. They have no more royal secrets to sell because the royal family completely cut off their access years ago. The palace iced them out, leaving them with nothing but recycled grievances and a rapidly diminishing bank account. This brings us to the ultimate devastating truth about why this story resonates so deeply with viewers around the world. We are not just watching a celebrity fallout, we are watching a modern morality play about the limits of weaponized victimhood. For a time, society was willing to listen to their pain. There was genuine empathy for their perceived struggles, but they made a fatal miscalculation. They assumed that victimhood was a permanent currency. They failed to realize that the public's patience is strictly conditional. When you demand to be treated as a victim from the confines of a $14 million mansion, while wearing designer clothing to poverty summits, the empathy curdles into resentment. The contrast is what makes the downfall so absolute. Back in London, the royal family's strategy has been utterly ruthless in its silence. The king did not retaliate with interviews. Prince William did not release a podcast to complain about his brother. They simply went to work. The king met with grieving families in private, offering genuine solace without a Netflix camera crew documenting his empathy. The Prince and Princess of Wales continue to build actual homes and fund actual educational research. The monarchy proved that true power does not need to explain itself. It simply endures. This is where the story changes forever. The Sussexes spent years trying to convince the world that the British monarchy was a toxic, archaic institution holding them back. But in their frantic, uncoordinated scramble for relevance, they inadvertently proved the exact opposite. They proved why the quiet, disciplined, duty-bound machinery of the monarchy exists in the first place. Without the institutional restraint of the palace, Harry and Meghan were exposed. They were given everything they asked for: total freedom, unlimited resources, and the world's attention. And what they built with it was a hollow, contradictory brand that is currently collapsing under the weight of its own ego. Looking forward, we are not going to see a dramatic, fiery explosion of the Sussex Empire. We are going to see something much worse. We are going to see a slow, agonizing fade into irrelevance. They will continue to launch products that no one buys. They will continue to attend summits that no one covers. They will continue to orchestrate photo opportunities that look increasingly forced and desperately sad. The tragedy of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle is not that they were destroyed by the media. The tragedy is that they were finally given the microphone and the world realized they had absolutely nothing of value to say. If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to subscribe and share this video. We will continue to dissect the psychology behind these high-stakes public relations wars. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next breakdown.